But we are going to begin with the news, and the news this morning is a key piece of evidence in the federal government's classified documents case against former President Donald Trump. You heard about it, now you're hearing it. An audio recording that's been obtained by CBS News, and in it you can hear the former president discussing what he in his own voice calls secret documents at his golf club in Bedminster, New Jersey. The recording was first revealed by CNN, and our senior investigative correspondent, Catherine Herridge, is in Washington. She got hold of the tape just last evening. Catherine, good morning to you. A lot to listen to here.
Good morning, Tony. In the 2-minute audio recording, the former president denounced his former top military advisor, General Mark Milley, and appears to share what he describes as highly confidential and secret information involving a Defense Department plan of attack on Iran. And in the indictment, he's accused of showing the records to a small group, apparently with no security clearance.
He said he wanted to attack Iran and what? These are the papers. This was done by the military, given to me.
All right, crew. Jack speaking. Time to turn it up. At a Bedminster meeting with unauthorized individuals, Trump showed them classified national security information, material that would later become the centerpiece of the most damaging criminal evidence ever collected against a former president. The meeting involved people with no security clearances and no legal basis to access such materials. Trump pulled out a document and began describing it to the room. He claimed it was a military plan of attack on Iran, prepared by the Defense Department and a senior military official. The document, he explained, detailed specific military options that had been developed at the highest levels of the Pentagon. But then came the moment that prosecutors would later describe as among the most devastating pieces of evidence in the entire classified documents case. The audio recording captured Trump saying words that would haunt his legal defense for years to come. "As president, I could have declassified it," he told the room. "Now I can't, but this is still a secret."
A newly obtained audio recording may be a key piece of evidence in special counsel Jack Smith's case that alleges former President Trump put national security at risk by mishandling classified documents, including one he suggested was prepared by Joint Chiefs Chair General Mark Milley.
I have a big pile of papers. This thing just came up. Look. This was him. They presented me this. This is off the record, but they presented me this. This was him. This was the Defense Department and him.
According to the indictment, the recording from 2021 captured a conversation Trump had at his New Jersey golf club with a book writer, a publisher, and 2 staffers, none of whom are believed to possess a security clearance.
Let's see here.
Yeah.
I just found, isn't that amazing? This totally wins my case, Mm-hmm. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. Look at this.
The audio recording appears to contradict Trump's recent claim that there were no documents and the material was just newspaper clippings.
That was a massive amount of papers and everything else.
He called it highly confidential. He referred to it as secret information. He explicitly stated that this was material prepared by the military and given to him personally by the Defense Department. The context of this disclosure makes it even more damning. Trump wasn't sharing this information for any legitimate governmental purpose. He wasn't discussing national security strategy or seeking input on military operations. He was furious, absolutely livid. The target of his anger was General Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Trump had been enraged by news reports portraying Milley as the hero who protected the country from an illegal Iran strike during Trump's final days in office. According to these reports, Trump had wanted to launch a military attack on Iran, and Milley had stepped in to prevent what would have been a catastrophic decision.
Talking about Iran and other things, and it may have been held up or may not, but that was not a document. I didn't have a document per se. There was nothing to declassify. These were newspaper stories, magazine stories, and articles.
Trump has repeatedly insisted he declassified all the documents he took with him, but in the recording...
See, as president, I could have declassified. No, I can't, but this is classified.
This recording shows that Donald Trump knew that he had a document when he was no longer president that he could not declassify.
Ricky Kleeman, a CBS News legal contributor, says the audio recording still leaves the door open for the defense.
He's going to say that he never had a document in his hand up in Bedminster, New Jersey, and that he was just waving around some papers willy-nilly.
Former President Trump earlier this month pleaded not guilty to 37 counts related to the mishandling of classified documents. He posted last night that the audio was, quote, illegally leaked and spun by Special Counsel Jack Smith, the FBI, and Justice Department, and called the tape and transcript an exoneration, Tony.
Trump was portrayed as the reckless president who needed to be restrained by his own military leadership. Trump believed the document he was holding proved exactly the opposite. He thought it would demonstrate that Milley, not Trump, was the real hawk. The military had prepared a plan of attack, and the documentation showed Milley's role in developing aggressive military options against Iran. Trump was convinced this document would exonerate him in the court of public opinion and prove that his portrayal as the reckless one was completely false. So he showed classified national defense information to people without security clearances at a club he did not own, as a former president with no remaining classification authority, all to settle a personal score with a four-star general.
Well, there is panic in the White House amid speculation over alleged secret recordings from Situation Room meetings. According to an Access report, senior White House officials suspect that New York Times journalists have obtained audio recordings of Situation Room, that is, of Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, who may have obtained audio recordings of the discussions in the room for the upcoming book, Regime Change. Independent recordings devices are prohibited inside the Situation Room, making any unauthorized recording a serious breach of security protocols. The suspicions stem from remarkable level of detail contained in excerpts that have been published by the New York Times ahead of the book's release on 23rd of June. The excerpts reportedly describe high-level discussions on foreign policy and domestic controversies, including matters related to Epstein files. One account details U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio's sharp criticism of Israeli Prime Minister's strategy on Iran.
And in doing so, he said three things on tape that legal experts have called absolutely devastating and highly damning for the prosecution. He acknowledged that he knew the document was secret. He admitted that he had not declassified it. And he confirmed that he was showing it anyway, despite knowing its classified status. The evidence is on tape, audio recorded, preserved in Trump's own voice. The tape is part of the federal court record, available for any future prosecution of the classified documents case after January 2029, when the Department of Justice policy protection expires, and the without prejudice dismissal preservation function converts from protection to prosecution. Ready evidence.
Another portrays senior officials discussing whether Ghislaine Maxwell would help divert attention from scrutiny surrounding President Trump. White House officials cited in the Access report have not disputed dialogues from the top-secret sit-room talks. In fact, Trump, according to the report, is furious by the blow-by-blow account. Inauthentic, that is, if they prove to be authentic, the alleged leak would raise serious concerns about the security of the Situation Room, long regarded as a venue for the U.S. government's most sensitive deliberations. However, Axios in its report has also noted that Haberman and Swan conducted more than 1,000 interviews for the book, which covers Trump's second term, suggesting that access to audio recordings may not have been necessary. It cited the example of veteran journalist Bob Woodward, who helped pioneer modern political journalism by reconstructing detailed conversations in his books from interviews with participants and witnesses, rather than relying on audio recordings alone. The report even argued that such accounts can be assembled through extensive reporting and first-hand recollections of those present during key discussions. Haberman and Swan have declined to Axios report for a comment on the allegations.
The investigation into Trump's handling of classified documents showed clear signs of nearing its conclusion. NBC News confirmed that Trump's lawyer sat down with the special counsel and other Justice Department officials. This meeting came as a grand jury was expected to convene in Florida to hear evidence in the case. Such meetings are significant data points that indicate an investigation is winding down. They represent the moment when defense attorneys make their final pitch, arguing why their client should not be accused of any crimes and why the case should disappear entirely. The specific legal significance of the Bedminster tape lies in those three critical admissions. Now I can't declassify it. This is still a secret. It's highly confidential. These statements directly and simultaneously address the three elements prosecutors need to establish beyond a reasonable doubt in the classified documents charges. The first element requires proving the defendant possessed documents containing national defense information. The Bedminster tape establishes this conclusively. Trump describes what he is holding, attributes it to the Defense Department and Milley, and characterizes its content as a plan of attack. The second element requires proving the possession was unauthorized, that Trump had no lawful authority to possess the document after leaving the presidency. His admission that he can no longer declassify it directly establishes this. Trump specifically acknowledges that his authority to declassify ended when his presidency ended, meaning his post-presidential possession is not covered by any claim of prior declassification. The third element requires proving the retention was willful, that Trump knew the document was classified national defense information and chose to retain it anyway. His admissions that it is still a secret and highly confidential establish this beyond any reasonable doubt. Trump is acknowledging in his own words that he knows the document is classified and secret at the very moment he is showing it to people without clearances. Three elements of the crime, three admissions from the defendant's own mouth, all on the same tape. Legal experts call it devastating because it is. The defendant has provided on tape precisely the evidence prosecutors needed to establish precisely the elements they needed to establish. The missing document angle adds a specific and revealing dimension to the Bedminster tape's legal significance. Trump's lawyer subsequently told the DOJ that they could not locate the specific Iran plan of attack document that Trump had been waving around at Bedminster. The document disappeared. It may have been misidentified. It may have been moved. It may have been destroyed. The specific circumstances of its disappearance have not been publicly established, but the tape remains, and the tape contains Trump's description of the document, his characterization of its classification status, and his admission that he knows it is secret and has not been declassified. The missing document's absence does not eliminate the tape's evidentiary value. It potentially amplifies it. The tape establishes Trump's state of mind about the document's classification status at the moment he was discussing it. The document's subsequent disappearance raises additional questions about what happened to it after the Bedminster meeting ended. These questions add an obstruction or spoliation dimension to the evidentiary picture that the tape alone does not provide. What is on the tape is Trump's knowledge. What happened to the document afterward is a separate question whose answer potentially adds additional layers to the accountability picture. Understanding why the Bedminster tape exists at all requires understanding Trump's fury at Milley. The ego-driven score-settling motivation reveals everything about the character of the conduct the charges describe. Milley's specific documented conduct included the China call, his characterization of Trump as fascist to the core, and the Lafayette Square apology. These elements form the background of the personal feud that produced the tape. Trump's attempt to prove his innocence in the Milley dispute produced the evidence of his guilt in the documents case. The broader pattern of public warnings from Mattis, McMaster, McRaven, and Kelly represents convergent institutional military testimony about Trump's character and fitness. Their assessments, combined with the experts' characterizations of the tape as absolutely devastating and highly damning, provides specific professional legal assessments of the tape's evidentiary quality. The Milley-Fury context is crucial because the Bedminster tape exists specifically because Trump was furious at Milley and believed showing the Iran plan of attack document would prove his case in the personal dispute with the general. This specific motivation, personal score settling with a four-star general who had portrayed himself as protecting the country from Trump, is the causal origin of the most damaging evidence in the classified documents case. Trump showed classified information to people without clearances, not because he needed to share it for any governmental purpose, not because he believed the disclosure was authorized, not because the document's content was relevant to any legitimate activity, but because he was angry at Milley and thought the document would help him win a personal argument. The ego-driven score-settling motivation is simultaneously the explanation for why the disclosure occurred and the most direct evidence of the recklessness that the charges describe. A person who shows classified national defense information to unauthorized people to win a personal argument with a general is demonstrating precisely the kind of willful indifference to classification requirements that the Espionage Act counts are designed to address. The Milley-Fury is the motive. The motive produced the disclosure produced the tape, and the tape is the evidence. Understanding what Trump was actually angry about and what the underlying facts of the Milley dispute were is essential for understanding why the Bedminster tape is not just damaging to Trump's legal case, but damaging to his political narrative as well. The reporting that triggered Trump's fury was about Milley's conduct in the final weeks of the first term. Specifically, the phone call that Milley made to his Chinese counterpart, reassuring him that the United States military would not initiate a surprise attack, and the described interactions about nuclear command authority. Trump characterized Milley's China call as treason and said he should have been executed under prior-era standards. The document Trump was waving around at Bedminster was specifically intended to show that it was Milley and the Defense Department, not Trump, who had been preparing aggressive military options against Iran. Trump believed he could prove that Milley, who had been portrayed as the restraining voice preventing an illegal war, was actually the person who had been developing aggressive war plans and that Trump's hands were clean. The specific and historically significant irony of the Bedminster tape is that Trump's attempt to use a classified document to prove his innocence in a personal dispute with a four-star general produced the most damaging evidence of his guilt in the criminal case that grew out of his possession of classified documents. He waved the document at a private club to people without clearances to prove he was not the hawk who wanted to bomb Iran. And in doing so, he proved on tape in his own recorded voice that he knew the document was secret, that he had not declassified it, and that he showed it to people who had no lawful authority to see it. The broader pattern of military leadership public warnings provides essential institutional context. Milley's documented conduct, combined with the public statements from Mattis, McMaster, McRaven, and Kelly, constitutes the most extensive public criticism of a sitting or former president by his own senior military leadership in the modern era of American civil-military relations. Mattis, Trump's first defense secretary, called him the first president in his lifetime who did not try to unite the American people. McMaster, his national security advisor, has written extensively about Trump's character failures and their national security implications. McRaven, the admiral who commanded the bin Laden raid, wrote that Trump had made the United States less safe and that his attacks on democratic institutions were a threat to the republic. Kelly, his longest-serving chief of staff, has been among the most forthright in describing Trump's unfitness, including his reported comment that he needed generals like Hitler had. Each of these military leaders served under Trump, observed his conduct from positions of direct institutional access, and subsequently concluded in public that what they observed was dangerous enough to warrant the extraordinary step of publicly criticizing the commander-in-chief they had served. Together, they constitute the institutional military testimony about Trump's character and fitness that no single person's account could establish. A convergence of independent senior military assessments from the most senior available institutional vantage points. When legal analysts described the Bedminster tape as absolutely devastating and highly damning, they were making specific professional legal assessments about what the tape means for the prosecution's case. Absolutely devastating and highly damning are the specific professional language of legal analysts evaluating the quality of evidence against a specific defendant on specific charges. The devastation is specific. The tape provides direct evidence of the specific elements the prosecution needs to establish: knowing possession of classified material, acknowledgement of its classified status, and showing it to unauthorized persons. The combination of those elements in a single recorded statement from the defendant's own mouth is the evidentiary quality that produces the absolutely devastating assessment. Legal analysts understand that a defendant's own recorded admission is the strongest available category of evidence, stronger than circumstantial evidence, stronger than witness testimony that can be cross-examined and challenged, stronger than documentary evidence whose authenticity or meaning can be disputed. A recorded admission from the defendant's own mouth of the specific facts that constitute the crime is the evidentiary equivalent of a signed confession. The Bedminster tape is that admission on tape in Trump's own voice. Prosecutors did not need to reconstruct what Trump knew from circumstantial evidence, from witness testimony subject to cross-examination, from documents whose meaning could be disputed. They have him on tape saying it himself. Now I can't declassify it. This is still a secret. Highly confidential. Those words in that order from the defendant's own recorded voice in a context that establishes he is showing the document to people without clearances are the evidentiary foundation that legal experts characterize as absolutely devastating and highly damning. The devastation is specific and technical, not rhetorical. Direct recorded admissions of the specific elements of the crime from the defendant's own mouth are the strongest available category of evidence and the category most difficult to overcome at trial. January 2029 represents the date when the Bedminster tape's ultimate evidentiary role will become fully available. The classified documents case was dismissed without prejudice, preserving the full evidentiary record, including the Bedminster tape, for any future prosecution after the DOJ policy protection expires. The tape is preserved. The 31 Espionage Act counts are preserved as charges that can be refiled. Jack Smith's congressional testimony that Trump willfully broke the law and that the evidence was adequate to obtain and sustain a conviction is the prosecutorial assessment of what the tape and the rest of the preserved evidence established. The missing document angle and the immunity framework analysis of which evidence can be used in a future prosecution add procedural complexity. But the tape's evidentiary value is not diminished by the classified documents case's dismissal. A recorded admission from the defendant acknowledging that a document he is displaying to unauthorized persons is still a secret and highly confidential is the kind of evidence that does not become less damaging through the passage of time. It waits preserved in the federal court record. And January 2029 is the date when the prosecution that can use it is no longer shielded by the DOJ policy that has been preventing it. The specific 6-person access level notation that Jack Smith's team described in the March 2026 congressional memo adds another important dimension to the Bedminster tape's legal picture. Prosecutors identified specific documents at Mar-a-Lago as having an access list of as few as 6 people authorized to see them. They described these documents as connected to business interests that raised specific concerns about who they were being shown to and why. The Iran plan of attack document that Trump described at Bedminster may or may not overlap with the specific 6-person access list document Smith's team described. The public record does not establish that overlap definitively. But the overall picture that Smith's investigators assembled of documents with extremely restricted access being discussed, displayed, and in some cases shown to unauthorized people at Trump's private clubs, is the specific evidentiary context that makes the Bedminster tape's 3 admissions most legally significant. Trump was not just acknowledging that he had classified documents, he was showing them to people at the clubs where the most restricted national security information was being stored, in at least one documented instance discussed with people who had no authorization to access it. The Bedminster tape is the most dramatically documented instance of that conduct. The 6-person access level documents are the most specifically restricted dimension of the same pattern of conduct. Both are in the preserved federal court record, available to the future prosecution that Smith described to Congress as having adequate evidence to sustain a conviction. The tape documents a specific act. Showing classified material to unauthorized people while acknowledging it is still secret. The military leader's public warnings document a pattern. The specific character that produced that specific act is not an anomaly, but the consistent expression of an approach to classified information, military relationships, and the obligations of command that the most senior institutional observers have all independently concluded is dangerous. The legal evidence and the institutional evidence together constitute the most comprehensive available accountability picture of a former commander-in-chief's relationship with the national security information he was entrusted with. The missing document angle combined with the preserved tape creates the specific evidentiary situation in which the defendant's admissions about the document's classification status are in the permanent record, while the physical document whose classification status he admitted has disappeared. That situation is not neutral for the prosecution. A former president who shows classified military plans to unauthorized persons at a private club and whose possession of that material subsequently becomes untraceable when investigators seek it, raises the specific question of what happened to the material. A question whose answer could add obstruction or spoliation dimensions to the evidence that the tape alone establishes. Watch whether any future prosecution of the classified documents case examines the specific circumstances of the Iran plan of attack document's subsequent unavailability alongside the Bedminster tape's admissions about its classification status. The tape establishes what Trump knew at the moment he showed the document to unauthorized people. The missing document raises the question of what he did with what he knew he had after the Bedminster meeting ended and the document subsequently became unavailable to investigators. Both questions are available to a future prosecution that has access to the full preserved evidentiary record that Smith's investigation assembled. The tape, the 31 Espionage Act counts, the surveillance footage, the witness testimony. The Meadows cannot recall classification testimony, and whatever investigative leads the sealed grand jury record contains. January 2029 is the date when the prosecution that can ask all of those questions simultaneously about what Trump knew, about what he did with what he knew, about the missing document's subsequent fate, is no longer shielded by the DOJ policy that has been preventing it from being asked. The Bedminster tape waits in the preserved record. The military chief's warnings are in the permanent public record. And the accountability question they both address, what a commander-in-chief who said, "This is still a secret," while showing it to unauthorized people should face as a consequence, waits for January 2029 to become fully answerable. The fury at Milley created the evidence. The evidence is on tape, audio recorded, preserved in Trump's own voice, and the tape is in the preserved federal court record, available to any future prosecution of the classified documents case after January 2029, when the DOJ policy protection expires and the without prejudice dismissal's preservation function converts from protection to prosecution, ready evidence. The most damaging evidence in the entire Trump criminal exposure waits, preserved, permanent, and devastating.